There was a time before time, when only the waters existed, endless and patient. From them rose two beings, Ometecutli and Omechihuatl, Lord and Lady of Duality, parents of possibility. Their thoughts were seeds. From their quiet will came the great gods who would shape the ages. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror; Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent; Tlaloc, the god of rains and storms; Chalchiuhtlicue, the goddess of rivers and lakes. They gathered in a sky of nothing and decided that the silence had lasted long enough. A world must be made. A sun must rise. Tezcatlipoca stepped forward first, a jaguar's shadow flickering over his obsidian mirror. "Let there be strength," he said. "Let there be teeth in the night, and courage to face them." He became the first sun, and under his watch the earth opened her eyes. The first sun, Naue Ocolotl, the jaguar sun. Giants walked that world, tall as cedar trees, slow and solemn as mountains. They pulled rivers into new paths with their hands and stored thunder in caves. The air was heavy with the smell of wet leaves and warm stone. When they laughed, boulders rolled. When they sang, eagles circled to listen. Tezcatlipoca loved them for their force, their stubbornness, their unshaken gaze. But strength is a blade with two edges. Where giants step, smaller things break. Where power grows, pride follows. The great ones forgot to bow to the sky that fed them. They mocked the wind, who carried seeds. They mocked the rain, who fattened the corn. Even the god who rose for them felt the sting of their careless laughter. And there was another, Quetzalcoatl, bright as morning, his serpent body wound with emerald and shell. He watched the first world and felt a different hunger. It was not jealousy alone. No, it was a conviction that the world should be more than weight and raw. "Brother," he said to Tezcatlipoca, "your sun shines, but it blinds. Your children are strong, but they do not kneel. Let me raise a gentler light." The sky tightened. The lake of the heavens grew still. Words, only words, became a weapon. Tezcatlipoca's mirror showed the first sun's flaws. Quetzalcoatl's breath fed a wind of change. Their quarrel cracked the firmament. Tezcatlipoca fell from the sky, wounded, and the world shuddered. Night came walking on four paws. Jaguars poured from the forests, silent, striped with shadows. They moved like smoke and lightning at once. The giants who had never knelt found themselves on their knees, eyes reflecting gold fire as the cats closed in. The air filled with an iron taste. Roars overlapped until they became a storm. And the giants were devoured. The power that gave them life was also their doom. When the time of this sun ended, jaguars, Tezcatlipoca's own sacred beast, emerged from the darkness. Thus the first sun fell, consumed by its own nature. When the sun rose again, it rose over empty valleys and broken hills. The first age had ended in teeth. The first sun had died. Quetzalcoatl ascended. He stretched himself across the sky, a river of feathers and light. The second sun, Nahui Ehecatl, the son of wind. Under his gaze, the world softened. The mountains did not crumble, but flowers found new courage between their stones. The people who rose then were not giants, but humans, small-boned, quick-eyed, laughing often. They learned to grind corn and paint their faces for festivals. They told stories at dusk about a serpent who loved them and a mirror who watched. The wind moved through their villages like a blessing, cooling the clay as it dried, promising rain. But a wound shared by gods does not heal easily. Tezcatlipoca, fallen, licked his injuries and stared into his mirror. He saw a world where gentleness grew like a vine, wrapping his name in silence. Was this justice? Was this balance? He rose again, not as a sun now, but as a storm. The wind that had been a gift became a blade. It arrived all at once, a voice that roared through canyon and cornfield with the same wild hunger. Houses took flight, thatched roofs spinning like birds without minds. Trees bent, roots tearing, then snapped like arrows. Mothers clutched children. Men tied ropes around their waists and around the trunks of old, honored trees, and the trees themselves were stripped and gone. Days of storm, then nights of storm, and then a dawn where nothing stood. The survivors woke with hands that were no longer hands. They swung from branches with bodies remade, tails curling for balance, their human words lost in chatter. The second sun fell, blown out like a candle in a cry of air. Silence again, but shorter this time. The gods had learned that endings and beginnings might share a door. From that door stepped Tlaloc, his eyes bright as rain on basalt. The third sun, Chalchiuhtlicue, the rain of fire. At first, his rain was kindness. The sky bruised purple and blue. Then the rain walked softly over fields, each drop a promise. The people planted and harvested, skin smelling of wet earth and smoke from cooking fires. Children splashed in puddles, and frogs sang like tiny drums. Temples rose with steps like terraces of cloud, and up those steps walked priests with bowls of flowers and cacao, offering gratitude to a god who did not ask for fear. Tlaloc had a beloved, they say. Some name her Xochiquetzal, the flower-feathered one, alive with perfume and laughter. Some say she was simply the warm side of the rain, the softness after a storm. However you call her, know that she was stolen, by trickery, by jealousy, by the quiet knife that slides between gods when pride is wounded. Tezcatlipoca smiled in the reflection of his obsidian mirror. Quetzalcoatl said nothing, but a feather fell from his throat and would not rise again. Grief is a storm with no horizon. Tlaloc's tears were not water. The clouds blackened with ash that had never been born of any volcano. Lightning came down in luxuries, and each bolt ruptured the ground, turning soil to glass and river to steam. Then it began, the rain that was not rain. Fire poured from the sky like molten corn, glowing seeds that burned the hands that tried to catch them. Roofs burst into light. Hills walked, raging, and their feet were lava. The people ran and could not find the edges of the burning. They leapt into lakes and found that the water itself had remembered the gods' loss. It boiled them into silence. Those who escaped, few, wild-eyed, found feathers pushing through their skin, arms stretching into wings. The air took them, laughing and weeping at once. They fled upward and did not return. The third sun bled away behind smoke. After fire, water. Chalchiuhtlicue, lady of jade skirts, took the sky. The fourth sun, Chalchiuhtlicue, the sun of water. Her light was blue-green, and it threaded itself through rivers and lakes, braiding waterfalls into necklaces for the earth. Under her care, the world softened once more. Fishermen learned patience. Children learned to float on their backs and watch the clouds parade like white jaguars. The people honored her with shells and mirrors as pale as dawn. They said her name slowly, as if it might spill, and smiled as they said it. But the gods are not one voice. They are a chorus with harmonies that sometimes collapse into clamor. Murmurs grew in the halls above the sky. She has no strength, some said. She is a river pretending to be a sea, said others. Accusation is a bitter herb. Feed it long enough and it becomes a meal. Chalchiuhtlicue heard. Not the words alone, but the intent under them, sharp as bone. She loved the world, and the world loved her, and now they told her it was false. Tears rose and would not be held back. When a goddess of waters weeps, beware. Rain began that day and did not end. It did not fall. It descended with purpose, like armies in formation. Rivers swelled beyond their memory. Lakes climbed their banks and walked into cities, polite at first, then demanding. The sea remembered places it had not visited since the first dreaming. It came inland with a slow smile and lay down on houses like a heavy animal. Mountains wore shawls of cloud and vanished. Valleys shone with new, endless mirrors that were not glass. People climbed and the water climbed after them, patient as a mother, relentless as a debt. When the flood finally slept, the world it left was different. Those who had learned to breathe water survived as fish, their eyes bright as coins. Above the drowned steps of temples, only the tips of the tallest stones remembered light. The fourth sun set beneath a horizon that was everywhere. Darkness again. Not empty, no, this darkness was full of echoes. The gods gathered. They had made 4 worlds and destroyed 4 worlds, whether by intent or through the slow gravity of their desires. What now? The silence felt like a court awaiting judgment. Then quietly, they agreed. Another sun, one more chance. But not a simple raising. This time, the light would be born from sacrifice. They built a great fire in the heart of the heavens, tall as thought, hot as decision. The flames spoke a language without words. The gods arranged themselves around it like stones around a well. 2 were chosen to leap. Chalchiuhtlicue came dressed in wealth. Shells as pale as moon milk hung at his ears, and his robe glittered with the scales of fishes that had never been caught. He stepped forward, and the flames leaned toward him, tasting. He lifted a foot. The heat clawed at his pride. He hesitated. Around the fire the gods watched, expressions carved from wind. Across from him stood Nanahuatzin, the little pustule-covered one, poor, humble, a god who might have been mistaken for a beggar in any market. His offerings had been simple: reeds, thorns, a heart free of fear. He looked at the fire, and the fire looked back. The flames closed around him like a mother's arms. He vanished. The darkness had an answer for the first time in many ages. Shamed but still burning with his own kind of light, Chalchiuhtlicue followed. He threw himself into the fire, and the fire took him too, but not the way it had taken the poor god. It licked him like a reluctant host accepting a guest too late. A moment later, the horizon erupted. The 5th sun, Nahui Olin, the sun of movement, a disk of gold tore itself from the ashes, blinding, fierce. It was Nanahuatzin, remade as light. The sky, which had learned to distrust promise, held its breath, but the new sun did not move. It hung at the edge of the world, radiant and still, like a challenge. What will make it walk? The gods asked. They knew the answer. They had always known, even when they pretended otherwise. Sacrifice began with those who made the law. The gods opened themselves with knives of flint and let their essences flow like rivers into the sky. The sun shuddered, then took one slow step, then another. Day began to travel. Night pulled back but did not surrender. It learned its rhythm, learned its return. And the moon rose as well, a softer disk, silver and watchful. Tekuchistecatl's light could not rival the sun, and so it became the mirror that walks at night. His pride cooled into a constant dream. Under the fifth sun, the people were born again. Not giants, not birds or fish or monkeys. Humans, stubborn and soft, capable of cruelty and songs that make even mountains turn their heads. They built cities on islands and cities on hills, roads that tied valleys together like long braids. They learned to grow maize so sweet the wind paused to taste it. They carved stories into stone and skin, and they listened to the priests who said, "Remember the lesson. The sun moves because it is fed. If you forget, it will stop, and the earth will open like a mouth." So they prayed, they danced, they offered their own blood drawn with thorns, rubbed into the mouths of statues older than fear. In seasons of crisis, captives climbed the steps of high temples and saw the world laid out below like a painted cloak. Their hearts rose steaming into morning, and the sun, watching, walked on. To the Aztecs, this was not cruelty for its own sake. It was contract. The gods had given themselves first. Humans only kept the promise. Time turned its circle. Rulers came, warriors fell. Poets named the moon with 10 different metaphors and were not satisfied. The lake cities shone with canals that caught stars like fish. Markets were so thick with color that a man could forget the river of years while bargaining for a red feather. The fifth sun, above all of it, kept time like a drummer. It moved because it must. It moved because it was fed. But prophecies never forget their endings. The name of this sun is movement, and movement is not only the dance of days. It is the quake that shakes the bowl of the world. Somewhere deep, a serpent turns in its sleep. Stones remember being water and try to flow. The earth itself has teeth, and one day, the story says, it will bite down. Listen, the drum you heard at the beginning is louder now. It is not in the sky. It is under your feet. When the fifth sun ends, if it ends as the sages said, it will be an earthquake. No flood to teach us patience, no fire to cleanse our arrogance, no wind to strip us into other shapes. The ground will move in waves that topple walls like children's toys. The pyramid steps will slide like decks of ships. The great stone snakes that guard the temple thresholds will finally wriggle free of their carvings and slither into the streets. Mountains will fold, and the lake will stand upright to see what it has been reflecting all these years. People will run and find that there is nowhere to run to, because the road itself is dancing, and above it all the sun will falter, like a runner who has given everything. Do not fear this. Or if you fear it, let it be the sharp, clean fear that teaches you how precious each breath is. Remember how many times the world has died and been reborn. Remember that endings and beginnings share a door, and sometimes the door is your own chest opening to give what is needed. The Aztecs did not tell this as a threat alone, but as an instruction. Give so that the morning comes. Share so that the light moves. Honor the contracts that bind you to your family, your city, your gods, yourself. Night will come, as it always does. Coyotes will bark in the distance. The lake will pull a blanket of stars over its face. Somewhere a priest will set a bowl of flowers on the stair and whisper names that were old when the first corn sprouted. Somewhere else, a child will dream of a jaguar that is not a monster this time, but a guide, its eyes like twin suns, its breath warm as a kitchen. The child will follow and find a field of maize that glows faintly even in darkness. When dawn comes, the stalks will turn gold, and the drums will speak the old syllables once more. The story ends where it began, with silence, with waiting, with the knowledge that we are small and that this smallness is a sacred thing. The gods made 5 worlds, 4 fell. We live in the 5th. Walk gently, feed the light when you can. And if the earth trembles, stand still long enough to feel its heartbeat. And remember that you are part of a rhythm older than memory. If you enjoyed this video, there are many more legends waiting for you here on the channel. Tales of gods, heroes, and the worlds they shaped. I'd be honored if you left a like and subscribed so you won't miss what comes next. Until our next adventure, I wish you a legendary sleep.